Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us to the TPA Masterclass Crowdfunding Deep Dive with hashtag millennial host Andrew Sims, also of the MuggleCast. Happy Pride, Andrew.
Happy Pride, Amanda, and everybody who's here. I have my sweet Pride Lego set right here, the Everyone is Awesome set.
I love it. And so true. Everyone is awesome. Really grateful to
Mhm.
have everybody here. We are so grateful to have you here. Just wanted to introduce everybody to Andrew. Andrew is a podcast host, podcast editor, Patreon consultant, and has written the curriculum on building the perfect Patreon in his new online course. So Andrew started up several podcasts across a 17-year career in podcasting. I guess that's hashtag OG.
Yeah, I think so. It's wild to tell people that now that I've been podcasting for 17 years. I don't believe it myself, but I have. It's true.
Well, you are a prodigy because that means you started at age 10, right?
Well, I'm not that young. No, I started at like 16 years old.
Wow.
16. Still pretty young for podcasting.
I love it. I love it. Well, folks, we have the right speaker for this topic. So without further ado, I will have Andrew share good knowledge on crowdfunding deep dive. Throughout Andrew's talk, really quickly, please take a look at the bottom of your Zoom console. Andrew and I will be monitoring questions submitted in the Q&A, and you never know, he might answer them live during the talk. Feel free to share where you're coming from and promote yourself in the chat. I'm happy to have you all here. And Andrew, thank you so much. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda, and also happy to have everybody here. And Amanda mentioned the Q&A. Feel free to ask questions throughout, and I can jump in, or I'll save those questions for the end. But please, happy to answer anything you might be wondering about. I think largely I'm going to be scratching the surface today. So if you want me to get deeper in any direction, just let me know. So yes, my name is Andrew Sims, and as Amanda said, I've been podcasting for 17 years now. I might as well explain why I started so early because we did bring that up. So I've always been a computer geek, and I used to watch a channel on cable television called Tech TV. And one of my favorite people on Tech TV, Leo Laporte, he was hosting a show called The Screensavers. He got let go from The Screensavers. It was a computer show. And because he got fired from Tech TV, he decided to start his own tech podcast. And this was in the year 2004, 2005. Around that same time, I was involved with this Harry Potter fan site called MuggleNet, and it was the biggest Harry Potter fan site on the planet. It was doing really well, and I saw Leo start a podcast, and I was like, maybe we should start one on MuggleNet for Harry Potter fans. And that was in 2005. We launched MuggleCast in 2005. It took off. It was a really big success because if you know the Harry Potter books, you know they are very well written, and you can really go deep on them, just like with other fandoms, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, etc. So it was a big success from the start, and that's how I got started with podcasting. MuggleCast is still going today, and I'll explain why in a little bit, why it's still going today. In addition to that, I've done numerous podcasts over the years. If you know The Hunger Games and Twilight, I was doing podcasts for those books, turned movies as well. And then in 2015, I launched a podcast with some of my MuggleCast co-hosts called Millennial, and that one is still active as well. Both MuggleCast and Millennial are weekly podcasts. And then, as Amanda mentioned, I also recently launched an online course on building Patreons. But it also, while Patreon is in the title, it covers all types of crowdfunding because I know that people are looking at different crowdfunding platforms. We've been partial to Patreon because it has, in our opinion, some of the most flexibility and the most features. So that's what that little animated version of me on the right is. That is for the online course. So MuggleCast and Millennial are both supported by our Patreons as well as advertising. So just to start talking about crowdfunding, what are the benefits of crowdfunding? Because there are some really important ones that I think really drive people to take a good look at this. On your right, you'll see a couple examples of crowdfunding platforms: Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and Memberful, which actually was purchased by Patreon a year or two ago. Crowdfunding platforms offer podcasters a dependable income source. And I think this is one of the most important aspects when considering a crowdfunding platform. Advertising, as you might know, it can be hard to get. Revenue can be unpredictable. Let's say you get some great ad deals at the end of the year, Q4, during the holiday shopping season. And then Q1 rolls around the following year and all the ads dry up. That's because all the advertisers want to advertise in Q4. So with advertising, you get up and down income. You never know when these advertisers are going to drop you. Crowdfunding offers steady, reliable income. Your fans pledge to you, and you receive their monthly support every month. And it's so comforting to know that you can depend on that source. There will be a little churn month to month. Some people might drop off. Some people's credit cards might go bad, and they'll have to fix those. But for the most part, you can depend on revenue from a monthly crowdfunding platform. Another benefit of crowdfunding is it's creatively fulfilling. You are your own boss on these platforms. Now, these platforms do have some rules that you have to abide by, but for the most part, they are pretty flexible and they'll let you do what you want, and you are your own boss. Another benefit is it is a place to connect with your biggest fans. This offers a more intimate, closed-off place where maybe you can be more open with them, you can connect with them on a deeper level, and they feel like they're getting closer to you. And for a lot of people, that's a big benefit of joining a crowdfunding platform, pledging to your crowdfunding platform. And finally, it's a way to grow your work and receive creative freedom. Because when you aren't depending on advertising, when you aren't depending on merchandise sales, you can focus on creating your best work. And when you don't have to worry about if money will be coming in next month, you can spend more time working on this creation. I saw Amanda too mentioned Kickstarter. And Kickstarter, they've had a lot of success on Kickstarter. Kickstarter is great. I don't personally recommend Kickstarter for people who are established. Kickstarter is more for new people who are just getting started with something and maybe you want to launch something, at least in my experience. Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Memberful, these are for established audience, people who have established audiences. So I do try to draw a line between Kickstarter and some of these others. So I want to talk about MuggleCast when talking about crowdfunding. So the podcast was weekly from 2005 to 2011, and we decided to slow down the number of episodes we were doing come 2011 because at that point the books and movies had finished being released, and we thought maybe the Harry Potter fandom was going to die down. So we switched to a monthly podcast for the following two years, 2011 to 2013. And when come 2013 it was, Warner Brothers announced that they would be doing a Harry Potter spinoff called Fantastic Beasts. So they were promising a bunch of movies. And we were like, okay, wait a second. Maybe it's time to come back. And we were still enjoying doing the podcast, but we were monthly at that time. So we thought it would be a good idea to try to bring back a weekly podcast. And we decided to launch a Patreon. And we told our audience we would love to become a weekly podcast again, but we'll need your financial help to do so. And the thing is, like I said, we launched a podcast in 2005. When we were teenagers, I was in high school, and we had different priorities and needs at that time. I could do a podcast. We could do a weekly podcast and not receive income from it because we were just kids. We didn't have rent. We didn't have as much food to buy. We didn't have as many bills. But come 2013, when we're all adults, we needed to be paid for the time we were spending on a podcast. And I'm sure, as a lot of you know, podcasting takes a ton of time, especially when you're doing a weekly podcast or more than once a week. So we said, look, we would love to come back, but we need your help. We can't do this show for free anymore. And so we started plotting a Patreon, and they turned out big time for us. So both MuggleCast and Millennials Patreons have been successful for two reasons. The Patreons gave people the opportunity to help us alter the course of the show, and we've offered benefits that we knew our listeners would want. like I said, we switched MuggleCast to a monthly show, and then we said we will become weekly again, but you got to help us out. People were missing the show. They wanted that hit of nostalgia. They were still very much interested in Harry Potter and us talking about Harry Potter. So we said we will come back if you support us. But that wasn't enough to know for sure that we should launch a Patreon. We needed more confidence, and we needed to know, because also keep in mind, we were planning these Patreons around 2015. Patreon wasn't as big as it is today. So it's still a little murky in terms of, what kind of direction we should take with the Patreon. So, and I'm somebody who's second guessing everything. I am self-doubting. I'm worried. I'm stressed out, just like any good millennial. And I said, we need to go into this feeling confident. It would be so embarrassing if we launched our Patreon and nobody signed up, or we received fewer pledges than we were expecting. What kind of benefits are people going to want? So what we did was we created an audience survey to maximize our chances of success. And this is what I recommend all of you do. If you haven't, whether or not you've launched a Patreon, you should create a survey. Do it through Google Forms or another platform to figure out what your audience truly wants. To me, this is crucial to building a Patreon that will be successful. You don't want to go into this not knowing what your fans want. You need to find out if people are willing to pledge to begin with, how many people are willing to do that, what kind of benefits they would like to receive, and how much they would pay. That's a really important question as well. In a nutshell, just taking the time to create a survey will maximize your chances of success. Now, what can you put in this survey? We came up with a few questions that I definitely would recommend to everybody. First of all, just a baseline question. Hey, audience, would you be interested in financially supporting us in exchange for rewards? Just do a simple yes or no question. You can then say, if you're interested in supporting us, what benefits would you like to receive? And give people a big list of options, even options that you might not want to manage yourself, because what you might find is that an option that you don't personally want to do is actually something that a lot of your patrons want. And then maybe you can figure out a way to create that benefit for them because you know it is going to drive a lot of pledges. You also have to ask them, how much would they be willing to pay on a monthly basis? When we did this, our options were, I don't want to pay you anything. $1, $2, $5, and then $10. You could go higher if you want. If you look at some Patreons, you'll see some creators have $20 tiers, $50, $100 tiers. And if you think you can swing that, you might as well give it a shot. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you launch a Patreon and you have, let's say, like we do, $2, $5, and $10 tiers, people can actually pledge higher or lower. If they pledge higher, they can select which of the tiers that you have they can receive. So let's say we've had people literally pledge to us $100 just for a month, just because they want to toss us $100. And then at that time, they'll get access to that $10 tier level that we have. But anyway, so ask them how much they are willing to pledge. And then what other rewards they might like to see. So just create an open field question and answer box and see if they come up with any ideas that maybe you don't have. This could also be a place for them to vent. When we launched the Patreon, again, this was around 2015, some people were turned off by this idea. They said, just get ads like any other podcast. The thing is, though, things have changed since then. A lot of podcasters, a lot of creators have things like this. And platforms are catching on too. You look at Apple Podcasts, you look at Spotify, YouTube. They're all introducing different ways for creators to earn money through their platforms so that they can take a cut themselves. But my point is that the industry is changing, and listeners understand that creators would prefer a crowdfunding platform because it is that reliable, steady income that I was talking about earlier. You can also ask, how certain are you that you would support us if you received the rewards that you wanted at the price you selected? The reason I inserted this question in the survey is because I compare this situation to RSVPing for a Facebook event. You see a Facebook event, let's say it's a neighbor's party. 4th of July coming up. Let's say you RSVP to a neighbor's party. You say yes in the moment. You say you're interested in the moment. But when push comes to shove, especially when money's involved, are you actually going to show up to that event? So again, getting back to my own insecurities, I wanted to ask people, how certain are you, how sure are you that you would support us if you received the rewards at the price you wanted? And we did receive very reassuring results. I'll get into that in a moment. But just to run through some of the rewards that maybe you can list for people, you can say, we can put your name on a thank you page. We can give a shout out on the podcast to you. So, hey, thanks to Amanda. Thanks to Kira for supporting us on Patreon. Other benefits: see our planning documents, ability to influence discussion topics, let people have some influence over the show. And as some of you might know, listeners can be this endless wealth of content. They might be emailing in stuff for you to talk about. They might be emailing in feedback about things you've already discussed. And they also have a lot of great ideas. So let them influence the show. You can also offer to release content early. Let's say they get early access to each new episode of your show. For example, with MuggleCast, as soon as I finish editing the show on Mondays, I release the completed product to the patrons, and then everybody else gets it the next day. You can, of course, release bonus audio content. And Patreon has an incredible feature called the custom RSS feed. And with this feature, you will be able to, when a listener pledges, they will receive their own RSS feed that they can then pop into most podcasting apps like Apple Podcasts, not Spotify yet. I hope Spotify adds support for custom RSS feeds one day. Pocket Cast, my favorite podcast app, plenty of others. They offer support for custom RSS feeds. So when somebody pledges, they'll get their own custom RSS feed tied to their Patreon account. They add that to, let's say, Apple Podcasts. And then anytime you publish new audio content on your Patreon, that audio content will show up under the custom RSS feed in their Apple Podcasts app. And this is really great for eliminating friction between your podcast and Patreon. They can get your bonus content, they can get your ad-free content in their favorite podcast app, except for Spotify for now. So that's a really great feature and a really great selling point, I think, for patrons, because maybe your listeners want to sign up, but they're like, oh, it's another app. I'm going to have to go here to listen to the bonus audio content, which is probably one of the biggest drivers of pledges for us as podcasters. They don't have to do that. One-time setup to get this custom RSS feed into their favorite podcast app. And by the way, once if they ever stop pledging, that feed will no longer work. And if their credit card goes bad, the feed will no longer work as well. So it's a really great benefit that I'm really happy that Patreon created. As far as I know, this is the only crowdfunding platform that offers this feature. Some other benefits really quickly: be invited to attend a exclusive Zoom event, just like this one maybe, for patrons or for your supporters. You can create an exclusive Discord channel. Memberful and Patreon both have integration there with Discord. They can receive ad-free episodes, receive a new physical gift every year. There's all kinds of benefits. If you've been kicking around creating a Patreon yourself, you've probably looked at other podcasts, and a lot of them, there's a lot of overlap, but you can create some unique benefits too, things that appeal to your audience, and maybe you'll discover some of these more unique benefits in the survey that you create. One more great benefit that we do for our patrons is a custom video thank you message. And you could do this with any crowdfunding platform, really. We use this tool called Bonjoro, BONJORO.com. And it'll help you create a queue of new supporters. And every time a new supporter comes in, you can integrate through Patreon, but they also have support through with Zapier and a couple other tools. Every time somebody pledges to you, Bonjoro will create a new task. And then you click on that task, and it'll bring up a little camera window. And then you look into the camera and you say, hey, thank you so much, Amanda, for supporting us on Patreon. I really appreciate your support. Thanks to your support, you now have access to, thanks to your support, we're now able to grow the show, help it thrive, etc. And just use their name a couple times. Look straight into the camera. I think this is a really great way to surprise your supporters. You're taking a minute, let's say 2 minutes out of your day to thank somebody. Use their name. This means the world to people. And they really wanted to support you. So to receive, it's not a live moment, but the sort of one-on-one moment means a lot to them. And also the thing is, I love doing this because I think it helps retain your supporters. If I got a custom video message from Leo, who I mentioned at the top of this, I would never want to stop pledging to him. He took time to thank me. How could I let him down by canceling my pledge? So this really helps retain people as well, at least in my opinion. I don't have data to back this up, but personally, that's how I would feel. So anyway, you create this survey, you launch it, and then you review the results. A couple of the results that we found, a couple of highlights, 79% of people wanted to see our release schedule increase on MuggleCast from monthly episodes to weekly episodes. So that was good to hear. That was our plan. It was nice to hear that people wanted us to bring the show back to the old days. Also, 40% of people wanted to receive a physical gift. And we have found in the years since running our crowdfunding that physical gifts really drive people to pledge to our crowdfunding platform. People like receiving, so obviously podcasts are digital. They like receiving that physical gift. They like your podcast coming into their real world. And far and away, one of the most popular gift ideas is t-shirts. People love t-shirts. And by the way, I spoke about going from monthly to weekly. We had set up 2 goals on our Patreon. Patreon lets you set up goals. At the we set a $2,000 per month goal, meaning $2,000 in pledges per month. If we hit that goal, we would go back to doing episodes every other week. If we hit the $3,000 goal, we would go back to doing weekly podcasts. It took about a month to get to that $2,000 goal, and then it took a few more weeks after that to get to the $3,000 a month goal. And you might be wondering, how did you come up with those numbers? We had, like I said earlier, we got older. We couldn't be doing this for free anymore. We had done just some simple math to try and figure out how much it's going to cost to run the show, how much it's going to cost for this to be worth it for ourselves. So this is by no means a full-time job for any of us, but it is part-time income, and that really helps us carve out time for the show. And we've been weekly ever since. Like I said, we launched the Patreon in 2015, and we've been weekly ever since. Like I said, what drove people to pledge is they had the power to dramatically alter the course of the show. They had the power to bring us back to the classic era of MuggleCast, to talk about everything that's going on in the world of Harry Potter. Some good and some bad these days, unfortunately. But yeah, that was so that those 2 things, increasing the number of episodes we were going to do and physical gifts, were the biggest drivers of pledges. Now that we've been doing weekly podcasts for a few years now, I honestly doubt that weekly is as big of a driver as it is the fact that we are offering lots of benefits on our Patreon, these intimate benefits. We host these live Zoom events. We release bonus content. We interact with people in the comment section of the Patreon posts. We always reply to everybody who messages us in our Patreon inbox. There's just a very intimate relationship. And the other thing to consider too, at least in our case, MuggleCast is 17 years old now. So we have a really long relationship with our listeners, but I'll get into that in a moment in terms of determining how big your Patreon might become. Like I said, physical gifts, really big driver of pledges. A big thing we learned is that people want physical benefits. They also want the digital benefits that I ran through some of those already. They wanted our digital content to come to life. Some physical gift ideas, not just the shirt, but a sticker pack, magnets, a poster, a signed picture or album art, a personalized letter. We did that one year for Millennial, or a mug. Now, some of these are going to be time consuming and expensive. A mug, a water bottle. We produced this last year. This is for Millennial. It really turned out amazing. This one was one of our more expensive gifts because it's double insulated, it's well made, and of course, as you can imagine, these costs a pretty penny to ship. But it was worth it for us. We were able to manage the numbers and make it work. But some of these gift ideas are really cheap to produce and ship. Stickers, magnets, signed album art. These are lightweight, thin things that could fit in an envelope, and you can just pop a forever stamp or a global, meaning international forever stamp, and you can get these to anywhere in the world for, let's say if you're going international, $1 or $2 shipping. But then let's say signed album art. This is one of the earliest gifts that we did. We printed out this 5x7-ish size piece of stock paper, kind of thicker than normal printer paper. We printed our album art on the left side. We left a blank space on the right side, and then we signed the blank space. And we also printed on it, "Thanks for your support." People loved receiving a real autograph from us. And again, this was cheap to print and ship. These only cost us maybe a couple dollars per item. Maybe, let's say $5 max, especially if it's going international. It will take time to sign these depending on the size of your audience, but it's a personal gift. It's cheap to ship too. So this is a really great gift idea. In terms of balancing the numbers, the year that we did this signed album art, we offered it to our $5 and higher level patrons. They had to remain a patron for a minimum of 3 months to receive this gift. So let's say they pledge at the $5 level for 3 months, that's $15 we're guaranteed to make off of them before we spend $5 shipping this signed album art to them. We have found over the years that very few people drop off after they receive their physical gift because they still want to support you. And again, they receive a physical gift. It creates some goodwill. Between this and the video message, they're less inclined to decline to no longer pledge to you. Inevitably, some people will. Financial situations change. Maybe they don't listen to your shows anymore. That's okay. It happens. You just have to learn to accept that. But in your first few years with your crowdfunding platform, I would definitely recommend focusing on the cheap items until you work your way up, you grow your monthly income, and then you can look at t-shirts, a mug, a poster. While that's lightweight, you have to ship it in a tube. Some of these items are going to cost a lot more than others. And then I mentioned digital benefits. Those are very important too, especially for podcasters. Bonus content is really going to go a long way. Bonus content, the more intriguing you make it, the better. For Millennial, we save a lot of our more intimate, honest, gossipy content for Patreon. And one reason we do that is because it's nice to know who exactly is listening to this more gossipy content. We don't want certain people being able to listen to certain things. So by putting it behind a paywall, we know exactly who's listening. And this drives people to sign up because they know we're saving some of our really good stuff for behind the Patreon paywall. And for the Millennial Patreon, we know that people are going to, we know that certain types of topics are really going to drive people to sign up for the Patreon. So you can just kind of spot the trends over time. These crowdfunding platforms also have dashboards where you can track, when your pledges are growing or shrinking. One little tip about physical gifts, or even digital ones, you can make a benefit a limited time offer. And this helps encourage people to pledge sooner rather than later. If you launch your crowdfunding platform and you say the right stuff, you say this means a lot to us, we would really appreciate if you signed up. People might sign up, but they got to sit down for a couple minutes. They got to pull out their credit card. They got to really focus on it for a few minutes. And of course, maybe because they are committing to something new. They aren't going to be inclined to sign up right away. You know, it's a new monthly expense, especially these days with inflation and whatnot. So what you can do is offer a limited time benefit. And you can say, if you sign up within the next 30 days, 60 days, 3 months, you will receive X, Y, or Z. And this is going to push people to sign up sooner rather than later. You want to encourage people to sign up sooner rather than later, because it does take a few minutes to sign up for your crowdfunding platform. And they're not going to want to miss out on certain items. So pick a really good benefit and make that a limited time offer. And this doesn't have to be right at the launch of your crowdfunding platform. You could be launching something new in year 4 of your crowdfunding platform, but you have to tell people, sign up by this date, let's say August 31st of this year, or you will be missing this limited time exclusive benefit. We've done this a couple of times. We've done it with t-shirts. We've done it with signed album art. We did it with what we called the 777 challenge. Help us hit 777 patrons, and we will offer you X, Y, and Z. I want to return to the survey and determining the potential size of your crowd fund. So factors here are going to include the age of your show, the relationship with your audience, the benefits that you're offering, and how you promote it. And the benefits, you will be able to discover, like, you know, what benefits do people want? You'll be able to figure that out through the survey. But the age of your relationship and the age of your show is going to be so important. When people sign up for something like a crowdfunding platform, they need to feel like they trust who they're giving their support to. They want to know that you're going to come through with the benefits. With MuggleCast, we have a 17-year relationship. With Millennial, we have a 6 or 7 year relationship with people. People know us. People trust us. They feel like a term that's been used a lot this year is parasocial relationships. They feel close to us, and so they are more willing to pledge. I don't believe that crowdfunding platforms like Patreon, Memberful, Buy Me a Coffee, even some of these ones that Apple Podcasts and Spotify are offering, they're not for brand new listeners and brand new podcasts. They're for established podcasts. So if you're just getting started with a podcast, spend some time building the audience and your relationship with your audience, then return to one of these. Patreon in particular, and I would wager that this is similar with other crowdfunding platforms, they estimate that about 5 to 8% of your existing audience is going to pledge to your Patreon. So let's say you have 100 listeners a week. Those are 100 people that are returning to every episode. Those are your loyal audience, as I call them in my course. The 5 to 8% of that loyal audience is going to be pledging to your Patreon. So that's going to be 5 to 8 people. Maybe not a huge number, but it's also better than nothing. If your podcast has 100 listeners, 5 to 8 people pledging $5 to $10 a month could make a huge difference. And again, the goal is to grow that loyal audience over time, and then 5 to 8% of that loyal audience will be pledging to your Patreon or pledging to your crowdfunding platform. Like I said, this is Patreon stat. I've definitely seen similar numbers in my own work and people who I work with. 5 to 8% of their existing audience, their established loyal audience, will pledge to your crowdfunding platform. And then looking at one of the other items I have here, promotion. It's going to be really important to promote your crowdfunding platform within your podcast. And there are numerous ways that you can approach this. There's no wrong way to do this. I would just recommend not overdoing it. Focus on your limited time benefit while that benefit is running and being offered. You got to use your podcast, your social media, your mailing list, etc., to get the word out about your crowdfunding platform. You also, and this is really important, be open and honest about why you need their financial support. Excuse me. Speak from the heart. This is going to make a really big difference. Like I said, it's important to have a good relationship with your listeners. If you say, hey, look, I'm really busy outside of this podcast. I can't do this unless I receive your support. I need financial support to continue running this. That is going to resonate with people, and they are going to sign up. I've seen some people just get really honest, like, look, times are tough right now. I need your support. And their listeners will come through. One of the benefits of podcasts is that it does offer a very intimate relationship with your audience. They're putting earbuds in. They are listening to you every week. They trust you. They like you. They want to see you thrive. If you open up to them and explain why you need their support, they will come through for you. And that's another important thing to remember when you're doing if you're planning a survey, if you're putting together the Patreon. There are fans out there listening to you who want to support you and who want to see you thrive. Always keep that in mind. A good way to look at this too is you might be a podcast listener yourself. Think about what podcasts you listen to. There's probably at least one or two that you would support if they offered a Patreon. Getting back to Leo, they launched a crowdfunding platform through Memberful. And I immediately signed up. No questions asked. I don't even need the benefits. And some of your listeners won't care about the benefits either. It'll be nice to receive them. I just support Leo and the Twit Network because I want to see them thrive. I want to help out. I have a very long relationship with Leo's podcasts. I like everybody at the team. You know, I just want to help them out. Of course, I'm appreciative that they offer these benefits. You have to try. I mean, you can't just coast through with this. You got to give people something back. But there will be some people who don't need benefits. It's just good to know that they're there. Just don't take advantage of them and don't assume that everybody is going to want nothing. Some people will want something for their money. Also, give your supporters a name. I'll get back to that second to last item in a second. Give your supporters a name. Patreon, again, they study trends. They have noticed that there's a 4 to 8% increase in supporter retention if you give your audience a name, sort of like a club name. Admittedly, we don't have a club name for my 2 Patreons yet. It's been tough to decide on a name. We're thinking about it. Maybe Kira can hook us up with some good name ideas. But give your supporters a name. Let's say, you do a podcast about pizza. Call them the Pizza Heads. I know that's a dumb example, but giving them a unique name helps it feel like a sense of community, and they will want to stay in that community. And that's why Patreon was seeing that 4 to 8% increase in retention of supporters when you give them a name. Getting back to that second to last item real quick, insert promotions into your show naturally. So you can say, by the way, over on Patreon this week, let's say Eric, who's a member of our Patreon, tells us XYZ. There are ways to just subtly get in that you have a Patreon without like bashing people over the head with it. It's gonna be all about balance. You don't want to overdo all the promotion. People are gonna get tired of hearing the same stuff over and over again. Focus on different elements of the Patreon. Shout out somebody who might be listening live to your podcast recording through your crowdfunding platform, maybe through Discord, for example. Say, hey, so-and-so who's listening live right now, they just had a really interesting thing to point out over on our crowdfunding platform. And that's just a way to subtly remind people that one of the benefits is that you can listen live to the podcast as you're recording it. So that's my presentation overall. Like I said, I'm really just scratching the surface here, but I'd love to answer some questions. I don't know if Amanda, you were going to ask these or if you want me to read these myself.
Oh, sure. I can
Okay.
I can be the vocal proxy of the people asking.
Sweet,
And thank
sweet.
you. This was
I need
so insightful. I think we're all trying to think of really hilarious names for your patrons.
Nobody has to do the work for me. I was just vamping.
Kira asks, is there a way to keep track of downloads and stats when listeners use the custom RSS feed that you mentioned earlier in your talk? She mentions being hesitant to lose download numbers for sponsors. Great question, Kira.
Yeah, that's something I think about too, actually, losing download numbers for sponsors. The thing is that, at least for my podcast, one of the benefits we offer people who support us is an ad-free version of the show. So those sponsors aren't getting access to those listeners over on the crowdfunding platforms anyway. That said, I do keep in mind, like, okay, we have this many people listening outside of Patreon, but this many people are supporting us on Patreon. So in theory, you combine those two numbers, number of supporters versus number of people who are listening outside of your crowdfunding platform, that creates an updated audience number, an all-inclusive audience number. But to answer your original question, Kira, no, Patreon does not offer a way to get those download numbers, unfortunately. Maybe in time they will, but right now they don't. I know Apple recently added support for bonus content. You can definitely drill into those numbers, see exactly how many people are listening and subscribing and downloading those bonus content episodes. But yeah, no, Patreon in particular does not.
Sounds like a business opportunity for whomever has tech to do that.
Yes, I would say so. It is important. Another thing to keep in mind is all of this is so new. All these crowdfunding platforms are so new. Everybody's sort of just trying to figure this out right now. As is podcasting, relatively speaking. It's very new. Like, it's been around since 2003, 2004, but with Serial in 2014, that's when things really started blowing up. So there's still a lot of work to do in the podcasting and crowdfunding space. And I'm confident we'll get there in time.
Me too, if you are. That's great, Andrew. Thank you. Heather's asked a couple good questions. I'll start with this one. Heather says, I'm considering crowdfunding a specific project, as well as having a perpetual crowdfunding source like Patreon. However, it seems like a vicious cycle. To increase following to get a decent crowdfunding experience, she needs money to expend the energy to even produce that content. Yeah. So any suggestions on how to make this cycle a little more sustainable, less vicious?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the survey can help, because if you do create a survey, you can figure out exactly how many people are going to be, well, not exactly, but you can get a sense of how many people will actually pledge to your crowdfunding platform. And that way you can say, okay, I have X number of listeners, and it looks like Y number of those listeners will be are interested in pledging and helping me out. And then you can say, well, most of them said they will support me with $5 a month. $5 a month times, let's say, 30 people who it sounds like are willing to pledge to me around that level. It's 150 people. And then you start doing the math from there. But yeah, this is why I was mentioning earlier, being a stressed millennial, you are going to be taking some risks there. And the other thing to keep in mind with one of these crowdfunding platforms and promising people benefits is that you will have to follow through with these things. You can't let them down. That said, we have found people have been very forgiving. If we occasionally forget to post something, let's say we promise a monthly benefit, we forget 1 month out of a year, people are okay with that. They're supporting you because they love you. They understand you're a human and you're going to make mistakes. So maybe while you're plotting your crowdfunding, keep in mind that people are going to be lenient. You can't mess up the big stuff. You don't want to promise people a physical gift and then not come through with that. But if you're doing a weekly or monthly benefit, a digital one that's digital, and you forget, it's going to be all right. But yeah, I know that might not be entirely helpful, but there are some risks involved. You are going to spend quite a bit of time on this. If you maybe another direction to take with this is just, continue growing your podcast audience. And then once it does become bigger, you can then say, okay, now I've got an even larger audience. So surely more people are going to pledge. Let's say you do the survey a couple years from now. Wow, I've even more people than I expected who are interested in supporting me. Then you can really take the time to do it. But yeah, you're going to have to do some math here, and you are going to have to take a couple risks.
Really good advice. I will reference back to the promise to make a home-cooked meal and then have to deliver on that in a small kitchen in Brooklyn. and so I suppose one shouldn't take literally, I will give you my firstborn, in other words.
Right. Yeah. You gotta when you're plotting out what you're going to do, take the survey results in mind, but then think about, am I going to have time to follow through with these various benefits? You're going to have to sit down and really think about it.
I have an idea, Heather. I don't know if you're an artist, but if anybody's a hashtag millennial like Andrew and I really love Microsoft Paint. And I did do a fundraiser where I drew a crude stick figure that was custom. And I suppose you could even NFT it. So you heard it here first.
That's a good idea. It really is. Like, it's something unique. It's simple for you to do. You're creating a unique one for each person who signed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hand turkeys.
And you know what? That's enough. That's enough. It doesn't have to be a masterful piece of art. It's by you. It was for somebody in particular. So yeah, I like the idea. We did handwritten letters one year. No regrets, but that was a lot of work, and our hands were cramping quite a bit after doing this.
Ooh, anybody who's had to send thank you cards for weddings would have that experience. Right. Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Heather, and also Kira for your question. We have one more that Heather submitted, asking, how does Patreon's fulfillment service work? Is shipping included?
Yeah, so Patreon does have this program called Merch for Membership. And now Patreon has a monthly service fee, and they have, I believe, 3 different levels that you can sign up for when you join Patreon as a creator. And at that top level is where you'll find Merch for Membership. Don't quote me on this. It's around an 8 to 10% cut of your, might be up to 12 now, of your Patreon that they will take. But in exchange, you will receive access to this Merch for Membership program, and you select what type of merchandise you want to make. They have around a dozen different items: a poster, a mug, a shirt, a hoodie, a bunch of other things. Then you select a graphic to be printed on that item that you select. And then Patreon will print and mail out these items to everybody at the eligible tier level. And this is really great because it saves you a ton of effort. The only problem is they're taking a larger cut of your Patreon, but you can send up to 4 gifts a year. So it's a good offer. I haven't used it personally, so I would hesitate from recommending it myself, but I know lots of other creators do. We have never used it because we've just built relationships with vendors over time, and we've been more comfortable doing it ourselves. We also didn't want to give a higher cut from to Patreon, and by doing it ourselves, it offers way more flexibility than Patreon's been able to offer. So, getting back to the water bottle, they can't do something like this right now. We've done a t-shirt with a breast pocket print and then something on the shoulder. They can't do something like that. They do like kind of a single graphic in the middle of the shirt, maybe. There's just not as much flexibility there. So it's definitely worth taking a look at because it will save you a ton of time, at least, potentially money. Definitely save you a lot of stress. The other thing is, while Patreon does offer up to 4 gifts a year through Merch for Membership, I feel like 4 is a lot to give people every year. Because what if after year 2, you're doing 4 items a year? They're like, oh my God, now I've 8 items from a podcast in the past 2 years. That's nice, but that's enough. I don't think I need more than 1 thing a year from a podcast that I love. Maybe 2 things. 4 seems like way too much. So to me, I'm worried about, like, come year 2 or 3, I as a fan have 8 to 12 items. I'm like, okay, I need to downgrade my pledge because I don't want so much stuff from people. So just be careful if you go that route and picking how, deciding how many items you send people. You don't have to send them 4 things. You can send 1 to 4 things. I wouldn't recommend 4. It seems like a lot over time.
Well, speak for yourself, Andrew. I like presents. Just kidding.
That's fine. I don't speak for everybody.
No, I'm just kidding. I think that's 100%. I was just also thinking about the environmental impact.
Exactly.
I think that it's more and more in vogue to have something a little bit more recyclable or a little bit more maybe buildable, like a sticker collection you can add to your water bottle. I don't know. Maybe skins.
Or you send these things to people and they're just not going to use it. Like, Somebody, I'm not going to say who sent this, but I received a gift. It was a Bluetooth speaker that was a cassette tape. The cassette tape was a Bluetooth speaker. While interesting, I'm like, I'm never going to use this cassette tape that's a Bluetooth speaker because it's crappy quality. It's a speaker built into a repurposed, I don't even know if it was repurposed, probably not, cassette tape. So then I felt guilty about throwing it out because it's like, it's gonna rot in a landfill for the rest of the time. It's just, there can be wasteful gifts, and that's definitely an example of one of them.
Well, we can always go back to our hashtag millennial childhoods, think about iron-ons or fake tattoos. I've seen those being, because you can slip them in a card. Yeah, yeah. I love
I need
merch.
to consult with you. You have a ton of unique merchandise ideas or benefits, dinner at my house, you know.
Oh my goodness. Well, do not follow that lead, but I would certainly say that was, unless you find joy in that. Obviously, the other side of it is very fun. I did have a crafting thing. I fundraised for a different enterprise where I taught my bandmates how to sew patches using a specific stitch for each kid here from the Midwest. And it was really fun. We had a little band event where we all sewed patches on shirts. They looked a little, I don't think anybody wore them, but they were fun memorabilia. Yeah, very amateur hour. Anyway, but it was very much made with love, and people who loved us and wanted to have a connection. Just to your point, Andrew. So anyway, Heather, hope those were helpful. Yeah. And also I might encourage all TPA members, head on over to Slack, share what merch was a big hit in a chat on the general channel. Feel free to document or share your notes from this discussion. This is recorded. And I just wanted to thank Andrew again so much, Andrew, for sharing all your knowledge and information. I strongly recommend everybody follow Andrew, listen to these wonderful podcasts. Very fun, very great content, and MuggleCast is just I really love that podcast. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's been fun sharing all this information. And please, if anybody has any other questions or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out. And I can give you some more feedback or advice or anything else.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here, folks. Andrew is definitely not making you sign up for Patreon to do that. And, although that could also be a value add, right? A cameo with Andrew. Anyway, I've got a lot of ideas on that, but I will save those for the next time. In the meantime, everybody, I want to thank you all so much for being here. As Kira is naming, Andrew does have a really great course to help folks really deep dive and tailor their own approach. I'm going to copy and paste into the chat an invitation for you to share your feedback on this and any the Podcast Academy educational programming that we've had. This was certainly a talk shaped and requested by TPA members. And so I'll include you in the invitation to continue sending us your great ideas. If you are not a member of the Podcast Academy and you're still sticking around, thank you so much. Visit us at www.thepodcastacademy.com or email education@thepodcastacademy.com. And you will get that information. We have a special scholarship if you are an independent podcaster and or a member of an underrepresented community, because we want your voices in our wonderful communities here at the Podcast Academy. So folks, it is almost the bottom of the hour. It's been really great having you here. Again, Andrew, thank you so much. I hope everything continues great and your enterprise continues growing through crowdfunding and other sponsors.
Thank you. And thank you to you and the members of the Podcast Academy for creating this community. It's really cool.
Our great pleasure. Well, happy podcasting, everybody. Thanks so much. You've been wonderful. I've been Amanda, and we will see you at the next event. Bye.
Bye, everyone.